We're fighting a battle. We're singing the same song, trying to find someone who cares as much as we do. We're climbing the ladder while we're sinking in this boat, trying to find someone who cares.
Hello and welcome back to Babble, Scribbler, the strange podcasty type show where we talk about My Little Pony, the fandom and all its related things. Today I am joined by Quill and Led, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and what he's here for. Quill?
Hello, I am Quill and Led. I am an artist of NoPlace.com and just an artist on DeviantArt in general.
And also not actually Russian, although that's quite a good impressive accent.
Hey, it is the season. Might as well give it a go.
True. Although Vladdy Bear's probably going to take my arse to town for this. Because he actually is Russian. I know he subscribes to me on Twitter. So, yeah. Although, Vladdy, if you're listening, can I have my back pony lines, please? Right, today, speaking of the season, this is a very special Nightmare Night-themed podcast. Quill is here to talk with me about a little fic called Something Sweet to Bite by Nakaman. And since this is Quill's choice, I'm going to let him introduce what this fic is about, obviously in a non-spoilery way. Although there will be spoilers in this review, but we'll let you know where they are. Quill, take it away.
Basically, Something Sweet to Bite is a more darker version of the pony version versus Halloween, which is Nightmare Night. It gives a very darker edge to it, so to speak. There's also a nice little history as to the origins of Nightmare Night. And there's lots of death, so if you, I warn you now, if you're easily squeamish or you're easy to make sick, I take caution with either reading this. Or if you're too lazy to read like myself at times, you can listen to the audio or the fanfic reading that was done by Emogak.
Indeed. The fanfic reading was released in October 2014 and is freely available on Emogak's channel, and we'll put the link in the description below because it's well worth a listen. To be perfectly honest, I think this fic works better as a reading, and as is the case with a lot of grimdarks, reading on the page is not as viscerally effective as hearing the flesh peel off bones. But you are right.
God.
Yeah, this is definitely not for the faint of heart. If you thought Cupcake was bad or you didn't like Rainbow Factory, stay the fuck away from this fic because it is far worse. It is quite possibly the goriest thing I've ever read, and I've read Fallout Equestria. Put it that way.
Kudos to Emogak and everyone who was involved, I believe yourself included, for making the fanfic reading what it is.
I was absolutely minimal in that. I had a few Fluttershy lines, and then I basically watched Lost Narrator and Emogak put it together. Because Lost Narrator and Emogak, they were the major players in that one. So many kudos, I don't think you can count kudos. We're going to say that we can count kudos. Many kudos to Lost and Emogak for that one. But
still, you had some sort of contribution here and there, not just Fluttershy. Come on!
Oh, yeah, I was Pip when I got eviscerated and skinned. But anyway, backtracking a little bit from the reading, we'll go back to the original fic. Nakaman is an author who is not as well known as some of the other big name fanfic, gorefic monsters.
And that should be rectified.
It should be, because he has a lot of dark fic on his fanfiction page. Again, linked in the doobly-doo. But Something Sweet is the start of a trilogy of fics of sort, and they all feature a character called the Candy Mare. Now, yeah, if us talking about this so far hasn't made you want to go and read or listen to it, and you don't mind spoilers, carry on, but we are entering spoiler territory now. It details the story of the Candy Mare and also the origin of Nightmare Night. And to give some instigation of this, of what the entire fic is about, there is actually a blog post on Nakaman's channel from 3rd of October 2012 called Something Sweet to Bite, again linked below, where he details what caused him to write this particular fic.
And what caused him was very weird, actually, in my honest opinion. But it was, you get your inspiration from somewhere.
Well, yeah, he got his from a spider bite and being on antibiotics and watching his own flesh rot away.
Ouch.
It is absolutely no surprise that this turned out to be as gruesome as it is. So, it details the origins of a character called the Candy Mare, who is a wholesale OC villain. And also goes back, it's told partly in flashbacks. Now, the timeline of this fic is a little bit odd.
It's very jumbled, back and forth between past and present. And different points of the present, too.
So, past, present, and future. But we're going to take it in more linear fashion. We're going to detail like each storyline as we go along, talk about what we like, about what we don't, and then move on to the next storyline. The first one then is Candy Bear. I will get this out at some point. Candy Bear, she started life as a tiny filly who was full of love and life, and she was an earth pony at a time where the 3 pony tribes were just about starting to get on, but the relations between them were not great. So the unicorn city that was near her earth pony lands fascinated her, and she adored unicorns, and she loved watching them, and she wanted to go and visit them. And her poor farmer parents were not really interested in this, apart from her dad had business in the unicorn city and got a special pass to take his daughter with him once to see what the city was like. He had business at this sweet shop.
Oh, I don't see anything wrong going on here.
He took his daughter to visit a sweet shop run by a unicorn who, unfortunately, as we like to find out, was born without a sense of taste or smell. He could only taste sour things, and yet he wanted to carry on his family's legacy of a sweet shop. And so, because he had a twisted heart, he kidnaps fillies, especially earth pony fillies, because they're least likely to be missed, and colts, kills their parents, because who misses earth ponies when you're in a unicorn city and the pre-real established Equestria? And he force feeds them candy and has them test out his new concoctions, and if they die, they die, and if they don't, they don't.
Some of these concoctions are just very disgusting.
Yeah, I am, in fact, drinking cappuccino at this point, so if you hear random slurpings, it is because I've got a bit of a sore throat. So, yes, some of them are quite disgusting. We have one of grasshoppers on a bed of chocolate, and
cocoa butter. What is cocoa butter, by the way? Just go off on a tangent.
That's a normal thing. Cocoa butter is, I'm not entirely sure of the exact origin of it. I think it's from the cacao bean. I know that I am highly allergic to it, so I can't, use cocoa butter creams on my skin, and I'm allergic to chocolate, unfortunately.
Aww.
Yeah, that came on a couple of years ago. I'm allergic to cocoa.
I'm so sorry. You've never known the sweet, sweet taste of chocolate.
Sadly, I do know the sweet, sweet taste of chocolate, because that's what's made me allergic. I think I had too much.
Dang it.
But yes, I'm a salient lesson in don't eat too much chocolate. But something odd happens with this particular filly. Now, she's never named at this point. It's all told in dialogue, this particular flashback, which, again, is one of the reasons why it works so well as an audio reading. Instead of dying, he gives her candies over and over, and she survives. And sometimes he forcibly evacuates, making air quotes, evacuates her from her stomach and her bowels, and forces her to eat more and more. But he uses magic, and then he feeds her candy with the bits of magic of a warming spell in them. And
with some alchemy, too.
Yeah, and bits of alchemy. And they cause an alchemical reaction within her that cause her to transform from a small filly into a creature made entirely of candy. He also had previously fed her pieces of meat to see whether or not he could add meat to the candies, but the meat was from a rather unpleasant source.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, he'd actually fed her pieces of her own dried father.
Ooh, yeah, that is just the worst. That is the worst. Especially, I've seen something similar to that from one of the trailers for Far Cry 3. That is just awful.
You see, I'm getting into Walking Dead territory with this, with eating the legs of people who are still alive, but I'll digress.
Yeah, that was weird.
But she comes back. She is now effectively immortal because she doesn't have a sell-by date, I imagine. And she kills the candy shop owner and goes on a rampage throughout Equestria. And she has a taste for meat and blood because she's made of candy now. And the only thing that can stop her is Luna, who purifies her with the power of the moon and banishes her away to the darkness. Except that not long after that, Nightmare Moon comes about, and Celestia banishes Nightmare Moon, and the two, the Candy Mare, the tradition of giving out candy to the Candy Mare to make her leave your house alone and leave your children alone, and Nightmare Moon herself become intermingled, and this is how we have the origin of Nightmare Night, that it's actually this sort of almost pagan ritual mixing with the modern equestrian standard.
It's kind of like how our traditions evolved over the centuries, you know?
Yeah, and this is one of the things that Neckerman did say in his blog post on this, that he was reminded of things like Samhain and Will-o'-the-Wisp and Jack-o'-lantern and all the old legends and the Celtic traditions that surround what is now known as Halloween, and how it all went from being these pagan rituals to candy and piñatas. And he wanted to do something similar. Except then in fact, we won't get on to the next storyline yet. What do we think, first of all, of the Candy Mare as a character?
As a character? She scares me.
Well, that's kind of what she was designed to do.
Yeah, but here's the thing. The origin, I actually think, was pretty well done. I mean, a little girl being fascinated by something that's supposedly otherworldly to her, but commonplace for everyone else. It's kind of like a kid's first experience at Disney World. You know, how
yeah, it's a bit of a gruesome Disney World, but yes.
It's a very darker version. And this is just going back and forth between the fic and the audio reading because, well, the voice acting for the audio reading really brings these characters to life, especially Emogak's performance as the soon-to-be Candy Mare filly. Really sells those emotions.
Yeah, I must admit that was some damn good acting from her as the Candy Mare filly, that when she is being tortured, you genuinely feel sorry for this child and the things that she's being made to go through. And as I said before, because the flashbacks with the little filly adds becomes the Candy Mare, because it's all done in dialogue, it works really well as an audio reading.
Though, if I'm going to be completely honest, the details that Neckerman goes into with how gruesome these deaths are, think a book version of Saw. That's how I can see it.
Well, yeah, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves there.
Yeah.
So, Candy Mare herself, I must admit, the bit I liked best about her storyline was actually not her. It was the world building that Neckerman did of the sort of Equestria, if you like. The way that the ponies are tolerating each other, but haven't instantly dropped all their prejudices, and I like that. I like the idea that this took time to become a one-pony nation as opposed to 3 races living disgruntledly next to each other.
Yep.
I mean, the opening scene with them is her parents arguing about the Pegasi and her mum being suspicious that the Pegasi have withheld rain so that all the Earth Pony fields will die. And just that base prejudice that it added nothing to the plot, but it added a lot to the story and especially to the world building.
Yep, it did.
And the idea of the unicorns having a shining city that the Earth Pony farmers have to go to, and they're almost treated like peasants in ancient Britain. Because, obviously, being from Britain, I'm most familiar with our history, that it really did remind me of sort of Elizabethan and Stuart politics of the peasants would have to go up to the big house to ask for anything if they lived on the land, and they could go and do their business if they were merchants, but they could only go in the back entrance. And that was exactly what happened here, that the little filly and her father were allowed to go to the city, provided they'd paid their licence to be there. So they were allowed to be there. And they were only allowed in the back of the shop, and it wasn't even a huge establishment. It's a tiny little candy shop, but they were only allowed in the back way to let them know their place. And it's little subtle touches like that really sold that bit of world building for me. How about you?
I'm going to have to mostly agree. I'm not really much of a history buff, but I have seen a lot of movies based on history that definitely exercise what you just stated. And I do find it very sad that the peasants, whenever they do have business, only have to go through the back and just have to supposedly know their place. You know what I mean? It's just sort of a sad reality. And since it's sort of based on our reality, it's even more sad. Holding a mirror to ourselves that's bathed in fiction but still has some touches of reality in it.
Well, that's the idea, that all fiction is a mirror held up to reality in some way, shape or form, because everything is inspired by something in reality. This particular fic may indeed have been inspired by a brown recluse spider bite. But Neckerman admits that the story of the Candy Mare and the story of the little filly who was... Well, I'll read the bit of the post to you that regards this. In fact, you should probably read this because you've got a male voice and Neckerman is male. So,
okay. So where did the idea for this story come from? Many places, as most stories do. I've always absolutely adored Halloween since I was very small. Since my birthday fell so close to it as a child, I considered Halloween to be my holiday. Everyone else just got to join in. I also had a love for movies such as Halloween, Trick or Treat, and other such staples of slasher and anthology horror. That all ties into the story, but they weren't exactly the basis. No, the inspiration was a series of questions. What was Nightmare Night before Nightmare Moon? We know from the show there was a time when the 3 pony tribes ruled themselves, so there had to be a time when Nightmare Night first started being observed, like with hearthwarming. Further, why would ponies build statues to Nightmare Moon? Just to leave her candy? What could possibly be the true origin to this tradition? That was when I started thinking of all the old legends of Jack-O' the Lantern and Will-O' the Wisp. All those Celtic and old world traditions that have been warped and changed over the centuries until a night that was about honoring the dead and reconnecting with the community around a bonfire become about getting candy and throwing parties. There's always something behind even the most nonsensical traditions. That was where the idea of the true nightmare of Nightmare Night came from. That was where the seeds were first planted. Now, as to the Candy Mare herself, she had been bouncing around in my head for a while thanks to Doctor Who and the Happiness Patrol. Oh, and a little side note, I don't watch Doctor Who often, so this kind of falls flat on me. Those old episodes may be fairly campy and were often played for silliness, but there was something truly horrifying about the candy robot in the show that went far beyond the show it was in. The Candy Mare was born from my musing about a much darker, harder-edged version of that robot. And of course, a little bit of how I think of Pinkamena. Not Pinkamena Diane Pie, but the creature that lurks in the Tumblr blogs with a smile and delicious baked goods. Well, that and the running gag that Rarity has always made of Marshmallow. So, I set about writing a short story about the origins of the Candy Mare, how she was a little filly who loved life and magic, even if she was only a lowly earth pony, and ended up being brutally tortured and murdered because of her naive curiosity. It read well, but was far too bleak. And it was around the time I was bitten by a brown recluse. This would end up keeping me from seriously writing for close to 3 months. While it was a horrible ordeal, it did give me plenty of extra time to think about the story, what I really wanted to say, and how I really wanted to present the Candy Mare. Honestly, Something Sweet to Bite could only be a better story if for the extra time spent on it. Though I had always intended to take my time writing the story, there's something about being cut on repeatedly without anesthetics, watching yourself rot slowly, and being out of your mind on antibiotics and painkillers that really does something for the creative process. In the end, Something Sweet to Bite took everything I love about Halloween, about grimdark ponies, and about supernatural fiction and mixed it up. The extra time left the whole thing marinate, so that the flavors began to blend and seep into one another. And I think it turned out very delicious indeed.
So, the origin of the Candy Mare was existent before the fever dreams kind of turned her into something else. I'm reminded of James Cameron with the Terminator, that he came up with the Terminator. He had this image of a robot rising out of fire, but it wasn't until he had a fever dream while working on Piranha 2, which is a movie he really tried to get his name taken off of. He had a fever dream because he was really, really poorly while on set. And the fever dream itself gave birth to the idea and the plot of the Terminator. And this is the same kind of... Yeah, it is a very good movie. If you haven't watched Terminator, go and watch it.
Only doing yourself a disservice if you don't watch it.
But it's the same kind of thing with this, that the story itself grew out of... He had this little story ready with the Candy Mare, well, the little filly who was murdered, and she became the Candy Mare through fever dreams. And the resultant story has gone from being just a tragic little cautionary tale against trusting strangers and having hopes and dreams to a grimdark, gore-fest extraordinaire. I was going to say bonanza. A grimdark, gore-fest bonanza. Because this, in Goodyear Serenade's words, this fic is gore porn.
Well, pretty much.
There's no other word for it. Moving on to the other storyline from the Candy Mare, because she does enter the main six's lives and the CMC's lives. And she wreaks bloody havoc. Because the main storyline of the show is about Scootaloo, Sweetie Belle, and to a lesser extent Apple Bloom, and a bet with Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon.
Which,
now,
by the time of this recording, have been finally redeemed.
Well,
I'm not going to
semi-redeemed. Diamond Tiara herself has been redeemed.
Well, semi, but I still don't like them in this story, so just keep that in mind.
This story was written in 2012, so you have to bear in mind around about what timeline we're working in as far as show canon at this point. Diamond Tiara is a long, long way from being redeemed in this story.
I believe it takes place between seasons 2 and 3.
Yep.
Supposedly? I thought so.
Yeah, so in this story, she is the irrepressible bully, and she has a bet with the CMC. She believes that because Princess Luna came to the Nightmare Night celebrations the year before, that there is no need to leave Candy for Nightmare Moon's statue anymore, because clearly it's just Luna. And instead of leaving Candy, she wants to keep it all for herself. And she admits that she did that the year before, that she didn't leave Candy, she kept it all as soon as she realised she didn't have to leave it behind. And true enough, in the show's animations, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon are not in that group of ponies who were running around with Pinkie Pie and left Candy out. So Nakaman did take note of show canon, even in the background animation. And Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon bet the CMCs that they can collect more candy for Nightmare Night, and they sort of challenge, and in the way that small children do, they manage to shame the CMC into not leaving candy for Nightmare Moon, even though Pinkie Pie is kind of, you should, it's tradition. And woe betide anybody who breaks the rules of tradition. Tradition! And instead, Sweetie Belle finds half of a torn up book that Twilight and Pinkie Pie accidentally tore up in a fight in the library.
Nothing could go wrong whatsoever.
Yeah, and she and Scootaloo try to make some extra candy to put in their haul to try and beat Diamond Tiara, because they're convinced that Diamond Tiara is going to cheat, just like she did on the Easter egg hunt. Because of this, they get caught. And Pinkie Pie feels very betrayed, and Twilight feels very angry that they stole half of a book, even if they were going to give it back, until they realise what book they've been making candy from. And it's a book of old legends, and the ones they've been making the candy from are the Candy Mare. And they're the recipes of the old shop owner. So, and Pinkie Pie gathers up all the different candies they've made and demands that they all go and leave it as tribute at the Nightmare Moon statue.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't, because part of any ritual is the act itself and part is intent. And Pinkie Pie 100% believed that leaving that candy there was going to fend off the Candy Mare. But Twilight didn't. And it's a combination of the CMCs and Diamond Tiara not leaving the candy the year before, not intending to leave it this year, and the lack of belief in the ritual that summon up the Candy Mare. And she is brought to Ponyville in a flash of lightning that leaves a small, glistening filly in a crater by the statue.
Who hungers for pony flesh?
Well, yeah, she just keeps saying she's hungry. And she basically goes from there, from house to house, ripping up ponies and eating them. And the first two she meets are Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon.
Actually, the first ones she meets are the Applejack and Apple Bloom.
True, and this is where the jumpy timeline comes into things, that the opening scene of the story is actually from about 2/3 of the way through, and it's probably the goriest death after Pip. Because, Apple Bloom, while she and Applejack are making candy apples for Nightmare Night, she's
on a big cauldron, by the way.
Yeah, they're making it big style but old fashioned. And
Double toil and trouble, something by a burn and cauldron bubble.
They could get the Macbeth and Shakespeare references in there. But Apple Bloom is trying to make some extra candy to give out, and instead the Candy Mare finds her and dumps her into the cauldron of bubbling caramel. And Apple Bloom she's scalded to death and becomes caramelized. And Applejack finds her, but in trying to get Apple Bloom's dead by this point, because you can't submerge in caramel and live.
Especially burning caramel.
No. Applejack, unfortunately, she burns her mouth, and the Candy Mare finds her and rips off part of her face, chases her into the barn, and then stabs her through with a fence post that rips through Applejack's back, up through her mouth, unhinges her jaw, which falls off. And then because Applejack has some of the caramel on her, she eats her like a candy apple. We have some candy apples. But like I said, that comes from the 2/3 mark of the story. So you have to be paying attention with this story, and that was one of the things that kind of came out when the reading was coming out, because it was a weekly reading, and it was a very jumpy timeline.
Yeah.
You could listen to it all the way through, but then you had to go back and listen again in order to follow what was happening when.
I mean, I had to listen to it twice just to make sure I was getting the whole timeline correct.
See, I had the positive thing of I'd actually read the fic beforehand, because Emogak had decided to do a reading of it the previous summer, and it was a story that I'd sort of flung into a chat with some female VAs and gone, this is the goriest thing I've ever read, have a look. Not realising that it would therefore become a reading, because it's over 27,000 words long. It's not the kind of thing you would imagine would be a reading. But, Emogak and Lost fell upon it, like the Candy Mare on the Denizens of Ponyville.
Wait, didn't Lost say in a video that she almost dry-boarded herself when trying to record a gory gurgle?
That was me.
Oh, that was you? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost waterboarded myself trying to... Because one of the things about it is, like I said, I got my skin stripped off and my entrails eaten out as Pip. Unfortunately, you don't really know what that sounds like, so I was gargling Pepsi Max underneath the microphone and nearly waterboarded myself.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. I think Lost has nearly done that herself, but I can't remember what fic it was for. With this one, she was screaming for it. So that was the thing that she had problems with, because Applejack, she gets impaled and she's watching her sister bubble and boil to death. So there's some screaming involved there in her scene.
And the way that it describes her being pierced to the back end of her mouth.
Yeah.
Like I said before, it's like a literature version of Saw.
It is. It does emphasize the fact that literature can be just as descriptive and just as effective and viscerally, gut-punchingly impactful as visual arts.
Mm-hmm.
And the reading itself, I love it. I'm very much biased in favour of radio plays and things because that's what I grew up with. But this one, because it just lent itself so well to an audio version, it is, for me, the one... If it wasn't such adult subject matter, I would recommend this to anybody as a reason for why audio fiction is something that deserves a lot of respect. Myself apart, I would not hold up one of my own readings so much as I would hold up this one, because this one works so well. Now, this particular storyline, Pinkie Pie takes a central role in it, and Pinkie Pie and Twilight, for the vast majority of this storyline, are the main characters, with Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle taking over at certain points as well. Apple Bloom fades into the background because, for a large proportion of the story, she is absent, presumed dead, or in the process of being killed.
Or something else entirely, which we may get into later.
Such as?
Let's just say she didn't exactly die completely. But we'll get into that when we get to the end.
Okay, you mean Rarity?
Yes, you mean Rarity.
I did say we're in spoiler territory.
I did say, but I'd rather keep it a secret until then.
I think at this point we've spoiled enough of the stories that nobody's listening who hasn't already heard this.
Oh, fine. I'll say what it is.
Mm-hmm.
They become candified zombies.
Yeah, because after Candymare has run amok and they have defeated her, they think the way to defeat her is to eat the candy, but unfortunately it turns them into her followers. And there's the image at the very end of this story. Luna has been to the Canterlot Nightmare Night Ball this year, not Ponyville celebrations, and she finds that the entire courtyard of the castle is littered with the dead bodies of her soldiers after the party, and the denizens of Ponyville have marched to Canterlot with the Candy Mare coming to wreak revenge upon the only pony who was ever able to slow her down. And it ends on that image. Now, it deserves saying that this fic does in fact have a sequel, and the third storyline that we were talking about is actually, it feeds into that. Now, I've not read the sequel. I don't think Quill has either, have you?
No, I have not, but I'm definitely interested in giving it a look.
Yeah, there are 2 sequels. I only found out that there's actually a Hearth-Swarming one on the page as well, but I didn't even realise that, because I don't think it existed the last time I was on this page.
Because the sequel actually has two of the main 6, that one was barely featured and one was not even showing up.
Yep, and they would be the only 2 of the main 6 with wings.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
One of them actually got to witness the aftermath of the party, but the before of the candlelight invasion of the candy zombies.
Yeah, and this is one of the only things that I would say I had an issue with this fic, was the Fluttershy scenes. I saw no reason why they had to be as early as they were, because it did spoil the end of the fic. And if she had featured in the end of the story, I would understand why, because we as the audience would know where she was, and if she'd come thundering in and done something.
Maybe it's supposed to build up tension for the ending, but I honestly think it was kind of weak.
Well, if it was meant to build up tension for the sequel, I still think that her scene should not have happened that early in the story. It should have happened in tandem with the scene of the Candy Mare coming to town. Now, maybe it was that Nakaman just wanted to go straight from having the ponies eating the bits of candy and the dead bodies of their friends that are sticking to the candy, because that is the thing that happens, and going straight into the aftermath that turns out to be a complete red herring, and here comes the bad guy stronger than ever. That might have been what he was doing. He was having that lull in tension to build to the big finish, in which case that scene with Fluttershy shouldn't have been in this fic. It should have been in the sequel. Yeah,
it should have been. Maybe a nice intro, but who knows?
Yeah, maybe as an epilogue or as a prologue to the next story. But it just, because it didn't go anywhere, and because it seemed so ill-placed, and it broke a lot of the tension, because unlike the scene with Applejack and Apple Bloom, which was a good prologue because it was in media res. It dropped you straight into the middle of the action and made you ask, what's going on? I wish to know how we got to this situation, which is the whole purpose of an in media res opening. But the Fluttershy scene wasn't in media res. It started with a build-up talking about her not liking Nightmare Night, describing the year before, watching Angel Bunny get killed by zombie ponies, and it did.
As well as some glowing jack-o'-lanterns.
Yeah, and the jack-o'-lantern thing, I got confused by that because of that scene with her, that I thought the jack-o'-lanterns were meant to be, from what Twilight was thinking of, the jack-o'-lantern flaring to life as she was dying, as Rarity and Pinkie Pie are eating her while she's still alive, and she emerges as, I think, a blackcurrant flavoured pony.
Yeah, what is blackcurrant, anyway?
Have you not had blackcurrants?
I've never even heard of it till this fic. What are they?
They're kind of like blueberries or raspberries, except that they are sort of purplish black.
And what kind of candy can you make from those? That part really confused me when that came up.
Well, they've had blackcurrants. Just imagine, you suppose you don't have blackberries, do you?
I've tried blackberries once.
Well, that blackcurrants are like them.
Oh, okay.
They are really sort of dark, rich kind of flavour. I used to go blackcurrant and blackberry picking when I was a kid, because we lived at that point. We lived way away from my grandparents, but my grandparents lived in a part of the country that had a lot of countryside nearby, so we used to just go blackberry picking. And I can definitely remember coming home with an entire pail full of blackberries and shredded hands because the plants they grow on are covered in thorns.
Like roses.
Oh, so pretty and so nice, except when you bite into one and there's a worm. That's not pleasant.
No, just like apples.
But we are getting a bit off topic. So I was a bit confused, therefore, that when Twilight was dying and jack-o'-lantern fled to life, and she had the actual thought, that's what it's for, it was getting brighter as her life was dimming, because it was her life, it was her soul, being stolen by the Candy Mare as she was being enslaved to be a Candy Zompony. But there was already a lit jack-o'-lantern on the doorstep of Fluttershy's cottage in the earlier scene. So I didn't understand. How could it be that these jack-o'-lanterns are our ponies' lives, if that was already lit on Fluttershy's doorstep and she was still alive and hadn't been zombified? It didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense to me either, now you're saying it.
So, yeah, that particular scene either should have been later on and woven into the narrative a bit better, so that it had some kind of arcing conclusion, or if it was just sequel bait, it shouldn't have been in this fic.
That is true.
So that was pretty much the only major problem I had with this fic, because subject matter is the major thing people are going to have it beef with.
Mm-hmm. As I was saying, now this is just a nitpick, but going back to Twilight emerging as a candy zombie, the description says she had what was the berry called again?
Blackcurrant.
Basically, the blackcurrant eyes, they really didn't really tell me what kind of candy she was. I mean, we got descriptions as to what Rarity, Applejack, and Pinkie became, marshmallow, candied apple, and bubblegum with cotton candied hair. But the blackcurrant thing, it didn't say anything to me. I was thinking maybe like a purple Jolly Rancher or hard candy-like thing for Twilight, but I just guess I don't know a lot about different delicacies.
I just assumed when they said it was blackcurrant eye that it was some kind of blackcurrant hard candy. Because we have over here, blackcurrant sweets are quite common. They are just little sugar sweets, like hardened sugar with a blackcurrant flavouring in them. So maybe, I don't actually know where Nackerman's from. I'm just looking, because that would explain it if the blackcurrant sweets are quite common, like in Europe and in Britain. But there's no, This is the one thing about fan fiction, that it used to be, in the dim and distant past, that fan fiction would tell you where a person was from. I loved that. I loved knowing where the person was from that I was reading. Especially because it used to tell me, like, if English was this person's second language, and then I could just marvel even more at their stories. But, yeah, it'd be interesting to know where Nackerman's from, because he mentions a lot of sweets that don't exist here, and I had to go and look up what a candy corn was, because I had no idea what one looked like. They don't exist here.
Oh man, you were missing out. They're delicious.
No, we're not missing out. We have bad enough teeth as it is. That's kind of what the world thinks of us. Oh yeah, those British people, they're the ones with the big ears and the bad teeth. Yeah, cheers, Prince Charles. We really appreciate that, Charlie boy.
But seriously, candy corns are pretty good.
I will have to take your word for it. I didn't even have snickerdoodles until last summer for the first time.
If ever you're in America again and I see you at a convention or something, I will have a bag of candy corns in waiting. I swear.
Alright, I'll take your word for that. Right, okay, so the third part of the story we've already talked about is Fluttershy. The sequel, I'm probably going to check out, to be honest, because I re-listened to this reading. in order to have this review, I kind of want to see more of the Candy Mare. I liked it more the second time that I heard it, well, this is actually the third time I've heard it. I liked it more this time around than I did the first time around because I was able to follow it more. And taken as one coherent narrative, minus the Fluttershy scene, I think this works really, really well as a story, and it definitely gets you into the mood for Halloween.
Oh, yes, it does.
So, shall we have closing thoughts then?
Basically, my closing thoughts is if you're interested in something for Halloween, I definitely give this one fic a read or a listen if you want to have something that's a bit more detailed.
Are you eating candy yourself now?
Yeah, that's for me. I've heard this story multiple times, yet I'm looking at this lollipop, and yet I want to eat it.
Careful, it might be made from a bitter pony. You might in fact find that your stomach pushes your eyeballs out of your skull like happened to Pinkie Pie, and you become a zompony.
If I were to become a zompony, I hope I'm at least chocolate flavored. I like chocolate.
If I'm going to be a zompony, I hope to be a pony first.
Yeah, good story. I definitely recommend it.
And I would as well. As long as you're okay with the grimdark tag and the gore tag especially, because those are two things you are not going to get away from with this story. It is a good coherent narrative, minus that Fluttershy scene, and check it out. Give the reading a listen, or read it for yourself if that's what you prefer, but do check it out in some way, shape or form. Right, thank you very much for joining me today, Quill.
Let me just say this one thing. Nightmare night. What a fright. Give us something sweet to bite.
Happy Nightmare Night, everybody.
Happy Halloween. And thank you for having me, Scribbler.
You're very welcome.